Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. It is post-season football time again because of some scheduling things and all kinds of stuff that nobody out there cares about. We ended up having to record this episode instead of last week, this week. And because we recorded it this week, we lost one game, which we will discuss here in a moment. But I'm very glad to be welcomed by creative content writer Jim McConnell, as always, back on the podcast to talk football. How you going, Jim?
I'm doing well, Brad. How are you?
Good. Appreciate the time. Obviously, a fun time of year, but sometimes for a lot of the schools, it's a stressful time because postseason football is upon us, and it's a win and you're in, lose and you go home sort of situation. This format is not very forgiving, and that is sort of the nature of the beast because not only do we have one team that is sort of out of it at this point, we know we'll have one team moving forward because we got two of our teams playing each other. Jim, do you want to set the table a little bit on sort of where things are as we get ready for this weekend in terms of who's in and who's out?
Absolutely. So Thomas Dale had a bye last week in the Region 6A quarterfinals as the number 2 seed, and 6A did an interesting thing with their format this year because instead of having all 8 teams, they only qualified 6 teams this year. So the top 2 got a bye through the first round.
Right.
And most of the other regions around the state did the normal 8 teams got in. So Dale's rested, ready for a home game Friday, 7 o'clock against. Ding, ding, ding. Familiar foe, Manchester. These two teams play each other every year in the playoffs now.
Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah.
So that's going to be.
And Manchester got there how?
Oh, they beat Lansdowne from Virginia Beach,
right?
38-28. Wild kind of offensive game as Manchester games tend to be sometimes.
Right.
So
that's an interesting inner Chesterfield matchup and teams that clearly know each other very well. What's our other game this week?
LC Bird, which if anyone remembers us talking at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of uncertainty around Bird.
Yep.
They didn't start so great.
Nope.
But shockingly, as they so often do, they're right there.
They built that plane in the air.
They did. I don't know how they do it, but they just do it. And they are playing the number 1 seed in the region, probably the best team in the state, all things considered, Oscar Smith, down in 757. Yeah. And it's going to be a very tall order for them to be practicing on Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the fun part about postseason football is that you if you are able to sort of not just make it up as you go along, but if you're able to sort of adapt, and that is something that they've done all season, figuring it out. The problem is that then you're going to come up against teams who have been doing something else all season, and Smith, whether it's this decade or the previous decade, I mean, there's just so much talent down there. I mean, that's a obvious thing at this point. The thing about this matchup to me is if you look at some of the games that Smith has played, has anybody really punched him in the mouth the way maybe that Bird can? As you look at this game, Jim, what stands out to you about this matchup? And then we'll kind of piggyback and boomerang over to the other one. But what kind of stands out to you about this one?
I think Bird, they'll always have a chance because they defend.
Right.
And as anyone knows sports, if you can stop the other team from scoring, you will always have a chance.
Right. If you can, like I said, if you can punch them in the mouth, if you can kind of knock them off their game a little bit, because teams that are more offensive focused tend to get really rattled when they can't score the points that they're used to scoring.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about that this morning when I was preparing my diligent preparation for this podcast. That Bird, they seem to win games when people overlook them and say, well, they don't have high-end talent, they don't have this, they don't have that, but they play defense, and it's kind of old school, and it's maybe not as interesting as teams that spread it out and chuck it around and put up all these points and everything. But I would never, ever, at this point in my life, with the wisdom accumulated over 55 years, count them out. I don't know that they have enough offense to win, but I don't think they're going to ever show up for a game and be like, well, we have no chance to win this game.
Yeah, and the hard part too is that when you come up against a team like an Oscar Smith, it's not just the challenge of being able to stop them. You're going to have a number of guys who are playing both ways, right? And it's also the challenge, like you said, of scoring the points in order to make up for, a bad run fit here. A guy slips on a long pass there. I mean, it's not that hard to make a small mistake that can make a big difference. And I think that's the beauty and the curse, right, of postseason football, right? Is that, it's unlike basketball in the sense like basketball, your guys are playing both ways and whatever, but like a lot of it is so much more about the overall talent of one or two, three guys, right? This is, you've got to be so good across the board and you got to be so consistently good across the board. And it doesn't take a lot for a team as good as Oscar Smith or a team like as good as, Huguenot or whoever, right? To be able to pile up points, even when you're playing well, right? So it is a challenge, I think, for Bird in terms of, getting out there and being able to put up points, because that is a difficult thing, because even for a school like Oscar Smith, where it's an offense sort of maybe focused deal, their defense is not going to be but so bad because they're going to have those same athletes in a variety of places. Let's talk a little bit more about our first matchup, our inner Chesterfield matchup. How do you see that one kind of playing out? It's
a super interesting game. And again, you made a great point before about teams that are used to being able to score and maybe get a little feel in their feels a little bit when you can stop them from doing what they're used to doing and moving the ball. And you might get a little, start feeling that this is not normal. We're not used to having the team line up and just punch us right in the face. Nobody's really done that to Manchester. Like, Huguenot beat them badly, but it was mostly because Huguenot just spread them out and just, right. They have athletes for they're crazy athletic.
Yeah.
So Thomas Dale will punch them and punch them and punch them and punch them and punch them. That's what they do.
Yeah, it's their whole brand, yeah.
It is literally going to be an athletic team that's going to try to spread them out and find mismatches against a team that is just going to come at them like Rocky Balboa for how long's high school game? It's 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's
48 minutes. Look at that mental math.
Yeah. That's never good for us to do math. We should not be doing math live either.
Oh,
that's bad.
No doubt.
What's interesting is that, like, we look at Bird going, they get Western Branch, they beat them 35-7. Western Branch is not Oscar Smith by any stretch, right? Manchester goes and beats Lansdowne, so it's basically just Central Virginia and 757 in this whole situation. And it's not so much that that you look at this Dale and Manchester matchup and it's not so much just like who's going to be able to keep punching, but it's like who's going to be able to keep standing, right? Because you kind of do get the sense that, Manchester put up 38 points against Lansdowne in the first round, right? If they could get half that in that ballpark, that might be enough, right? Now, you probably don't want to own, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to shoot for that. But in a game like this, it could come down to literally the last possession, who has the ball last, that kind of thing. I think the thing about Dale that I'm curious about is, given the pedigree of this program over time, you would think that Dale is best suited for these. But I mean, Dale's not always had a lot of success in these sort of big moment sort of games. And so when you contrast sort of the pressure that comes with that versus the pressure that's on, Manchester, the one good thing about playing last week is that you kind of continue to keep it going. Now, sometimes having a bye is a good thing because you can rest up, you can sort of focus on your opponents, that kind of thing. But then there is a little bit of rust that comes with that, right? So the curious part for me is, in this game, one, Manchester doesn't have to go far, right? But then two, is there a rhythm that comes with playing the week after you play versus having a week off? And how is that balanced out against, as I said, the pressure of this moment between these two programs? I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to pick the game or anything here, but what's your best forecast? What are your expectations for how this thing will go between the 2 and the 3 in this region?
Honestly, I think the law of averages has to even this out at some point. I mean, Manchester's beaten them 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And the difference in talent level between the two teams has never suggested that one of them should win 3 games in a row. I mean, they're that close. And the staffs are both excellent. The programs are established. There's nothing between the two. Like, I don't think you could slide a piece of paper in between the two of them, honestly.
Yeah.
They're that close.
Yeah.
They're different. You know, their DNA is different. But I think Thomas Dale has to win one of these at one point.
Yeah.
I can't imagine them losing 4 games in a row. As you said, at the time of year when physical sort of blue collar football is supposed to, you know, it's going to be cool. It's going to feel like, you know, fall, like Thanksgiving, and a blue collar sort of run it team, play physical defense, and that should be a recipe for success. You know, I mean, it hasn't been, but it should be.
Yeah. What also is interesting too is that regardless of how this goes, Chesterfield's going to have at least one team in the quarters. It could be 2 teams in the quarters if Bird. So you talk about that sort of Thanksgiving vibe, right? Like, you could really have 2 teams going, you know, head to head from Chesterfield to put one of them into the Final Four in the state, because, you know, to get to those state semifinals on December the 6th, that's going to be, you know, it's one thing to take out an Oscar Smith if Bird's able to do it. To then have to come back the next week and take out either Thomas Dale or Manchester to be able to get to the state semis is very interesting, and certainly something we'll all be watching. I guess we should really quickly mention, because of the scheduling part of this, we were not able to cover Midlothian, who got through into the playoffs. They were the 4 seed, lost to Hermitage 26-14 in the first round. You know, that's also a very heavy sort of part of the bracket. If you look at at like sort of the sort of full scale of it all, what kind of season for Midlothian in your opinion as you look back on it?
I think it's another one of those, you know, what might have been. I think that their players are probably going to be going into another offseason going, we're better than the result.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's I mean, Hermitage is a very good team. Hermitage is a very tested team. They played a very difficult schedule. And so I didn't necessarily think, even though Midlothian got the home game as the higher seed, the 4 or 5 game is a pick'em game.
It's always pick'em, yeah. That's the nature of that beast. Honestly. It is. That's just the way it works.
And it's, you know, Region 5 is a tough one around here. I feel like they kind of all are, but Region 5 is a stacked sort of bracket, and so there's no shame in that. Midlothian has raised the bar with their program to the point where just making the playoffs can kind of feel like a little bit of a disappointment, and I have to think that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what you want, right? You want to be unfulfilled by just making it to the postseason, and certainly, you know, to get there and lose and not have the opportunity to continue to play is tough. And I think each of these programs we've discussed today, you know, there are other schools in this county that would love to be in that spot, to be playing in the postseason, to won a game in the postseason, to sort of be facing another Chesterfield team in the postseason, right? Because ultimately, all, you know, the other 6, I mean, they're all sort of vying for the same idea. Some of them have had some success. Meadowbrook got really, really close, and we'll talk about them real quick to wrap up. But you know, I just feel like if you're Midlothian, you have to use this going into the off season to sort of build around. And I know that is a tired cliche in sports, but in reality, winning is not something you do. Winning is something you learn. And it's a thing, I think, for programs like that, you know, if you look around the state, there are always going to be dozens of teams that felt like they should have had a better season than they did. And then you're only going to have a handful of teams who end up having the season that they wanted to have. And I think that's one of the beauties of sports is how do you respond to it? And we've seen, you know, Bird figured itself out, like as we joked about earlier with the plane in the air. Dale has figured out a way to continue to sort of feed that beast constantly and keep it churning. Manchester's continued to build a program that can continue to do that. So I think for Midlow, that's the challenge, right? Is to continue to figure out how to not just put yourself in this position, but what's it take for that next step? And hopefully for them, it's something that, is kind of put in the ground and starting to nurture from this loss going forward. Middlebrook, I mentioned, just misses. Jim was apoplectic for a minute there when he texted me the other night about this. Give me some quick thoughts on them as maybe our last sort of postseason flavor for the various teams from the county.
Yeah, I couldn't quite figure out how a team that was 6-4, like, again, doing math is,
math is not our thing.
I'm a word guy.
Yeah, and math is not our thing.
Whatever. But you look at 6-4 versus, the Franklin County got in at 4-6.
Right.
And you're thinking, who in the world is Franklin County playing to pick up power points to get in at 4-6? I don't understand it. But, I'm not alleging anything. Meadowbrook started out great. And, I was thinking, while you were talking about Midlothian, I was thinking, if you look at development of teenage boys,
brains,
they're developing a program, like in the development curve. Midlothian is further along because they started up a couple of years before Meadowbrook did. So Meadowbrook started out 4-0. They lose a gutter. I mean, just lose less than 10 seconds left to Thomas Dale in an undefeated game. Local kids, they all know each other. Huge emotional game. And I remember coaches saying, in these big games, you want to be careful with your players not to build it up too much. Because then you don't just lose once. You could lose twice. You could lose to...
It beats you over and over
You could lose to Thomas Dale 2 or 3 times. And I think probably that is what happened.
Yeah.
Because they started out 4-0, and they were looking for all the world, like, wow, this is a team that's not only going to make it, they could, like, do some stuff when they get there.
They did. They definitely had that vibe, and it did not go the way.
Yeah.
But as I said about Midlow, you're hoping that seed that's in the ground can start to sort of that you can nurture it and that you can sort of it'll bloom later on, because ultimately, very rarely do teams have the kind of fall that maybe Meadowbrook had from like an historic sort of standpoint, and then to just pop back on the scene to that level that fast, right? It takes a little bit of growing. And again, I know that these are tired sort of sports cliches, but the truth is that sometimes cliches are true. And in sports, a lot of times they are. And this is a situation where you have to do it rung by rung. You can't skip any rungs on that ladder. You have to take those steps. And sometimes a brutal loss that sort of derails your season can be what you need. And, at this point, in order, a year, 2, 3 down the road, that really gets you where you need to be, because it starts to become a different mindset, not just among players, but among the whole entire program, the school community, all of it. And as we sort of look forward, I imagine that Meadowbrook's not going anywhere. I think this is going to be very interesting when we sit down, next fall, or I guess late summer, to talk about the season ahead. Think about like Matoka, right? Matoka had so much talent, and then obviously so much of that talent went to the next level. And the Warriors were never able to sort of put it back together this season. That's sort of the name of this game. Sometimes you're just going to have to rebuild. Sometimes schools, they reload. And I think for Dale, for Bird, for Manchester, they've been able to do that. Meadowbrook wants to be one of those teams that reloads and doesn't rebuild. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes them before they can get to that point. But anything else for the good of the order before we wrap up, Jim?
Well, I just was thinking, and didn't bring it up before, but how delicious would this be as a Chesterfield resident, potentially, if Bird and Dale both win today? Thanksgiving weekend, Battle of Chester 2.0. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Like, we could end up with something in Chester, like they used to say in Culpeper when I worked up there, that, like, for big games, you could come rob a bank.
Nobody else would be there.
You could just walk right out the bank with all the money. Because
nobody would be there.
No one was there.
No one was there.
Everyone in the town was in the football stadium. I'm thinking a Thanksgiving regional final to go to state between Bird and Dale
would be crazy.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah. Well, not that we're counting you out, Manchester. Don't worry. Don't worry. Jim's not counting you out.
I am not. My children are Manchester alums. I have no bias against the Lancers.
I was going to say, don't send, if you're going to send emails, send it to Jim, not to me. But no, I think that's a good place to put a pin in it. Jim, thank you very much for the time, sir. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad.
All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that your shows are sold. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating review, we greatly appreciate it. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make a suggestion, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7 on the weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 20. Lastly, check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts, and I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Weekly video segments and newsletters, social media, the latest community news.
And this is your Chesterfield News Minute for September 19th.
How to get in touch, and everything in between. If you want to know about Chesterfield County, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us. Connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.